Can you believe that we're in 1 month into Disney Lorcana's release? And in one weekend, we had 3 major events. One was for Nintendo Switch, and 2 were for 1Ks. I'm all about competitive. I'm all about playing the game. But the idea that you could have played in both of these, depending on where you lived and how much you wanted to travel, in the same weekend, 2 1Ks in the same weekend, like semi drivable if you really wanted to. Nonetheless, I think it's really awesome. I really want to get into this. Let's break down the meta from week 4. That's right, guys. Meta at the glance for this weekend are the 3 premier events that were all, in some way, shape, or form, in the public eye. PPG's 1K Cash event took place on Saturday. It was a 6-round event cut to top 8, but in the top 8, everybody split, so we didn't get a definitive winner. We also had the Trading Card Game Con event, which was for a Nintendo Switch, and some prizes. This entire event was streamed over on the Illumineers channel. I can share the link in the description if you want to check out the actual games. And then there was the CCS Lorcana 1K. This was, to my knowledge, not covered anywhere stream-wise, and the information for it was kind of gathered throughout the day. So, guys, there is a ton of information from this weekend. Just these 3 events is 24 decks alone. I've also had some information recently about large local events that I wanted to chat about also. So much information, not enough time to completely break everything down in this video. So in the comments below, I want you to let me know if one of these events that I cover in here, you want a full breakdown of the event and my thoughts and opinions on the deck list and all of those things. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know which one of the events that you would love to hear more about. Now let's get into the deck of the week. The deck of the week should not be a shock to anyone. This deck has run rampant for weeks, and at the end of the day, it picked up the only win of the weekend. Every single event from the weekend was either a split prizes in top 4, a split prizes in top 8, but this is the surefire winner of the deck that won Trading Card Game Con in Tampa Bay and got the winner a nice Nintendo Switch. Ruby Amethyst has been running absolute rampant. I'm going to show you guys some numbers later on in this video that might actually blow your mind a little bit, but nonetheless, I've covered this over and over again. It just has so much. These cards right here are presumably the true core of this deck with the mesh of everything going on. It can be absolutely taken further than this for the actual overall core, but that's kind of the problem with this deck in general, right? It's a good problem to have, is there's so many good options for this deck that it's just continuous success is not a shock to many at all. All in all, the board control aspects of Be Prepared, Maui, Dragon's Fire, Rafiki, going to the extent of also having Zeus if you want it. We've seen it in some decks this weekend. Addition of Maleficent, Aladdin, Elsa, and Ursula's win conditions. We've also seen BLT and Mickey's, and more of things of other possible win conditions. And of course, the card draw power of Friends on the Other Side, of the Queen, of Magic Mirror, the card sifting ability of Ursula's Cauldron. The list goes on and on and on. This deck is phenomenal. It's consistent, and it's just continuously succeeding all over the nation and everywhere it shows up. Gotta give it what it's due, guys. And this deck is really good, and we're going to talk a little bit more of it throughout the rest of this video. So let's focus on PPG 1K in Miami first. So the top 8 decks were 4 Ruby Amethyst, 2 Amber Steels, 1 Emerald Amethyst, and 1 Emerald Sapphire. Now, the entirety of this event was streamed over on Pro Play Games Twitch page. If you subscribe to them, you can catch the whole stream in its entirety. If you don't want to do that, you can actually wait, and they're going to be releasing the video starting today at the release of this video, which is on Tuesday, and you'll get to see all 6 rounds of the event. In the end, the top 8 ended up being a complete cut, so there was no, surefire winner, but the 8 players playing in the event, shout out to you guys. 6-round event. The 5-1 in the event, if I remember correctly, was the Emerald Amethyst deck. which is, on the end of that budget deck that we were talking about in, a couple of videos back, where this deck is a pretty cheap and affordable deck. It was able to go 5-1 in the event. It had to win and in for the bubble. 6 of the players were able to draw into the top 8. 2 players had to play for the win. And going 5-1 in an event to this caliber is pretty sweet for a budget deck. So it's definitely something to be notable and be weary of moving forward, that is a real deck that you're going to see, come across in some of your potential upcoming local events. But nonetheless, PPG, again, throwing on an incredible event. They had 45 registered players for this event. They actually had to cap the event at 50 because of it kind of clashing with One Piece on the weekend with its release weekend. But nonetheless, they were able to get 45 players to play in this Miami 1K. Pretty great. And obviously, very clearly dominated by Ruby Amethyst as a whole. I believe of the 45 players, 10 of them registered Ruby Amethyst for this event, and 4 of them made top 8. So kind of just tells you all you need to know. 2 Amber Steels, the Emerald Amethyst and the Emerald Sapphire, kind of just showing off a little bit of splashes here and there and some diversity in the meta. At the end of the day, you still have 4 different decks in the top 8. And I know a lot of people are, kind of saying like, oh, it's just Ruby Amethyst and it's all we're seeing. But it is not true. Are we seeing a lot of Ruby Amethyst? Absolutely. But it's not the only thing we're seeing. And honestly, in this event, with some of the other things that came out, Emerald Sapphire is not something we had seen before be successful. We're going to talk about it a little later in this video, a little more in depth, but it's not something we see a whole lot of. Emerald Amethyst, we saw at PPG Denver and a little bit from reports from league plays and things like that afterwards. But aside from Amber Steel and Ruby Amethyst, pretty much every deck you could almost label as kind of an unknown and kind of a rogue deck in the format, because it's very clear at this stage in the game that Ruby Amethyst and Amber Steel are, kind of the rock and paper of it, but there's definitely room for some rogue for scissors. But let's get into the next event. So the top 8 of the Tampa Bay Nintendo Switch tournament, again, it was hosted and covered on the Illumineers channel. You can go and check out the entire stream at length, which had Liam from the Illumineers and Brandon from B Squared, both commentating over that event in its entirety. And you can see here a lot of kind of more of the same, but there's some differences here. So we had another event where we had 3 Amber Amethyst Rubies, 1 Amber Emerald, 2 Sapphire Steel, and then 1 Amber Amethyst, and again 1 Steel Amber. So some different decks looking here. You can see here that the Sapphire Steel was able to kind of shine here. So while in the event for Miami, we had a Emerald Sapphire, this is the first time we're kind of seeing Sapphire Steel really come out and perform at a local event or at, a nationwide event with on paper TCGs, not just like kind of the successful numbers that we're hearing from Pixelborn. So it's cool to see that this deck did have success. It did show up. It, had 2 decks in top 8, which is pretty exciting. I don't know for sure if they were, the same team or friends or things like that. He'd play in the same deck, but all in all, when you go into an event, you look at it and you can see having 3 Ruby Amethyst and then having 2 Steel Sapphires. It's just a note that these are the decks that were represented at the in the event most likely. I don't have all the numbers like I do for PPG because I was able to look at all 45 deck lists from PPG, but I don't have those same numbers for this. But nonetheless, congrats to these guys again. And as mentioned before, this was the only event that actually played out its entire event. Normally, that is very common when it's not for cash. It's very often in competitive play that cash events are ended up split once you get to a certain number. For Miami, it was a split to top 8. For Atlanta, it was a split at top 4, which we heard from a couple weeks ago in the Tennessee event, which also was split in top 4. So you can hear these really common things and entities when you start seeing that. But when you're playing for product or for a prize, like PPG Denver was playing for product, and then this event in Atlanta was playing, this event in Tampa Bay was playing for a Nintendo Switch, which means you can't really split a Nintendo Switch. You got to play it out and you have to play for it. So, shout out to the winner of this one. picking up the entirety of the event and with Ruby Amethyst nonetheless. The last event here is the top 8 of the Atlanta event, which was, again, before I messed it up, at the it was hosted by CCS, which is the Charlie's Collectible Show in Atlanta, Georgia. This is another one, a sheer dominance from none other than Ruby Amethyst, with 4 of them in the top 8 again, followed with an Amber Sapphire, an Amber Steel, another Amber Steel, and then a Sapphire Amethyst. So again, a little bit of diversity here. No Emerald to be found in this particular event. Lots of Amethyst again, lots of Amber again. Same with Steel and thing. So you're seeing these constant things each event, and now it's really going to start turning into how do we develop past them. In this event, it went to a split at top 4. So the top 4 were the Amber Sapphire and then 3 Ruby Amethyst. So all in all, shout out to these guys. Well played event. Splitting about $800 is always nice. So each player in the top 4 probably picked up about $200. The rest of you guys, great job. And this is not as big as a difference, and we're seeing we've seen some success from Sapphire Amethyst at the first 1K event in Tennessee that was reported upon. This is the first time we're actually seeing a Sapphire Amber deck kind of succeed in a public setting. We've seen the numbers come across on Pixelborn again, so there was definitely some life of it existing in the game and being played at a competitive level and by the top 100 players within Pixelborn, but not to the extent of actually seeing what the deck list looks like. So pretty interesting stuff. Pretty cool to see something different, but there was a lot of the more than same. And again, on the weekend, Ruby Amethyst taking up half of this top 8. So of course, with everything I just told you, we're going to break it down in an entire graph that I made and really look at what we should be planning for moving forward. But if you're enjoying the content so far, and if it's really been, if you're interested in hearing more about these things, again, let me know in the comments. If you want me to break down the deck list of any one of these events, I just didn't feel there would be enough time to put it all in this video. 24 decks is a lot to go all at once. So hit me up in the comments if you want me to break down the top 8 decks from all of these. We officially have all the decks from all of these events, so I can break any of them down. So definitely hit me up and let me know. And of course, if you like the video, hit the like button. If you're not yet, hit that subscribe. And now let's break down the entirety of the weekend. In my best attempt to show off a graph in Scott Landis fashion, this is the meta breakdown for the week 4 meta report. Now you can see here that what this graph is looking at is the top 8 of each event broken apart into one giant pie chart. So of 24 decks that created the top 8 across 3 events, 11 of them were Ruby Amethyst, which is taking up 45% of this weekend meta. And guys, I mean, that's a big number. In all honesty, like sometimes in games you hear of like 25%, 20%, maybe 30%, for the best deck in the game to kind of like always showcase itself over and over again. 45%, that's a large number. It's obviously the reason why it's the deck of the week. It picked up the only win on the weekend, but it also picked up nearly half of the top 8 slots across 3 separate events. I mean, that's astounding. There's not enough that I can say about this deck as a whole. And the crazy thing is, in all honesty, if you really go through, and I'll have all the links in the description of all these events and where the deck list can be found. But if you really go through and you look at these deck lists, they're all different. They're all over the place. There's definitely choices within each one of those that look different than the other. There was lists with Jetsam. There was lists with Zeus. There was lists with Poison Apples. Like there was all of these different things and different ways to create the Ruby Amethyst deck. And that's what makes it really interesting, because while we've constantly seen success from the deck, we have yet to see, the end all be all dominance of it, of what it's, best form, its ultra form, its Super Saiyan form, right? Like we haven't seen the absolute best version of it yet, which I think is really, really interesting. And it's definitely something we have to continuously follow leading up until Miami, which is really the biggest event that is going to be open to the most players to play in. There's already 135 registered players in the event. If you haven't heard it yet, here's a little bit of a little snippet right here we'll put up. And then of course the registration, you can still register in the description below. I'll make sure I have a link there too. 135 players already pre-registered. The event is a month away. That's insane. It's going to be huge. But all of these things that we're going to follow leading up to this, it all starts, in a weekend like this. This is a dream for every competitive player. The ability to find this type of information, to utilize these deck lists, to plan for your upcoming events, to keep practicing and putting in the reps in for Miami and other events that you might be attending. This is huge. And now you can go in and you can see if the next deck played is Amber Steel at 20%. So you can say, I can plan to go to an event, and at that event, there is a good chance that 65% of the meta will be two different decks. And when you have that type of information, if you if you think that your meta is going to look similar, well, then you can plan for that. You can build towards these particular matchups when you're considering what the deck you're going to play in. And even if you're playing Amber Steel or if you're playing Ruby Amethyst, you can use the information that half the field is playing Ruby Amethyst, or a fifth of the field is playing Amber Steel. What can I do in my deck to increase my odds in that matchup? What can I do to surprise my opponent? What cards are going to make a difference in some of these matchups that just aren't really seeing the true light of day and love? I think that those are some of the really interesting core factors of the success rate of these decks. It's very clear that players have been gravitating towards these two in combinations. Competitive players' dream is to utilize the information as best as they possibly can, whether it's to join the cause and say, I'm going to be team Ruby Amethyst, I'm going to play that deck, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to tech for the mirror, or I'm going to tech for Ruby Amethyst. Maybe I'm not going to care as much about some of these other matchups, because at the end of the day, if you look at these numbers, people just aren't playing these decks, and these decks just aren't that successful. 4.2%, 4.2%, 4.2%, 4.2%, and then an 8.3. Like, all of these decks are less than 5% of the metagame. So yeah, you can be weary of them. Yes, as a competitive player, you should acknowledge their existence. You should understand their game plans, but you necessarily shouldn't be tweaking to play in that meta, because they're not really guaranteed to be there. Now, again, this was across 3 events, and some of these events, none of these decks even existed. So if you had planned to play against Sapphire Steel as an example, who had a good showing in one event, well, the other 2 events, it didn't show up at all. So you would have wasted card slots, in your deck for a deck that wasn't even there. Now, granted, next weekend's a different weekend, right? Different ball game. You got to make your decisions. You got to kind of use your local experience, especially if you're traveling locally to play in these events. Try and gather as much information of what people have been playing in league, what type of card collection players have, because that makes a big difference in some of these choices for budget versions and things like that. Specifically, the Sapphire Steel deck, you can kind of make that deck just getting like 3 or 4 of the starter decks and then modifying it slightly above and beyond. But even some of these versions weren't even playing cards like Bell, or all of them were playing Hades, I believe. But still, it's interesting to see Sapphire finally starting to get some love, but it's all different flavors of it. Hades, key factor. That's a card that you're going to see in every Sapphire deck, but not every Sapphire deck's playing Bell. It's hard to plan if you don't know what they're going to be doing. And since there's not enough information about there yet, you can just kind of understand, like, okay, I know that deck exists, but maybe I don't worry about that nearly as much as Ruby Amethyst or Amber Steel. All in all, I honestly think that this is like some insane data. 45%, almost 46% if we round up, of Ruby Amethyst is a That's telling you something. It's telling you a couple things. The first thing is that people are playing it, players like it, players enjoy it, and it's very clearly the most consistent deck probably since its culmination. I mean, there was 2 of them in PPG Denver, and then there were 6 of them in the 1K in Tennessee. So those numbers, that's another 8 that you add on top. So that's 19 decks out of a possible 40. Again, that's like 50%. So like right there, you're still in the same numbers even if I add in 2 more. So just knowing that, you have to understand that when you show up to an event, you really don't want to play a deck that can't beat Ruby Amethyst or can't compete with Ruby Amethyst or just has a bad matchup. I would be personally looking for like a 30 or 40% matchup at worst if you're really going to consider you leveraging your skill against another players. That's the only way I would consider it. Otherwise, if card collection, if your collection is playing dividends, I understand all those things as well, but 100%, you need to at least understand that matchup to the fullest to give yourself the best opportunity to win in all of those matchups. And if you're going to play the deck, you damn well better be ready to play the mirror match. And that's exactly what I'd be preparing for if I were in the shoes of saying, I want to be a Ruby Amethyst player. How do I get better? How do I make the best out of my moments? And I would plan for the mirror, 2 or 3 times potentially in an event, in all honesty. Now let's talk about the deck on the rise. The deck on the rise this week was played by a content creator called First to 20. He's also named is Skinner. You can follow him on Twitter. You can find him on YouTube. I'll put his links to his YouTube in the description below. And I want to give him a shout out because honestly, this is the kind of deck that just pops out of nowhere and definitely, in all honesty, might get a couple of these. It might go, is that deck good? Like, is it a fluke? What did he play against? Was he like just skeeting in top 8? Like, what really happened? For me, I don't know. I wasn't there. What I can tell you is that Skinner has said that he's going to release a video about it. So I would definitely check out his channel to find out all those answers. What I can tell you is that he drew into the top 8. So no, he wasn't on the bubble. No, he didn't have to fight to win his last round. He was in a position to draw into the top 8. So how he would have done in the top 8, we'll never know. But the list itself is very interesting. So things that I really enjoy about this list and why I think it actually has a lot of potential success is Ward. In a big way, Aurora, Dream Guardian, and Cusco are huge problems for Ruby Amethyst. And for what it's worth, also Amber Steel. Both of those cards giving Ward to everything and then having Ward itself while on 2 lore and 3 lore characters with, pretty fair stats, it goes a long way. Impacting the game, with a song like Let It Go is another phenomenal card as we can talk about, but also having this follow-up. I mean, just look at all the 5 cost cards here. We have an Aurora, we have Maleficent, Cusco, and Mad Hatter. All of those cards swing for 2 lore or above. 3 of those cards swing for 3 lore. One of those cards removes a card when it gets removed, and the other one is gives ward to everybody, and the final one is draw a card when it defends. Those 5 costs are absolute fire. I mean, they're just really, really good. To follow up, the 4 costs are no slouches. We have Hans and Tinkerbells, which we have another 4 cost card, has 3 lore. We have Eye of Fate, which is very interesting. So it's turning our potential 3 and 4, our 3 lore characters into 4 lore characters, and our 2 lore characters into 3 lore characters, making cards like Jasmine and Cheshire Cat 3 cost 3 lore characters. A card like Flynn is a 2 cost 3 lore character with Eye of Fate. This is pressuring really, really, really well. It's a very, very interesting build. The addition of Phil is very nice because Phil gives support, lets your Flounders and your Dukes trade up, lets your Cheshire Cat actually make a potential trade out of nowhere that your opponent's not, realizing whatsoever. Definitely gives you ability to swing up, later in the game with Maleficence because she's a 3/6, and if you can kind of get away with an offensive swing and can afford to give up on 3 lore, lots and lots of options to trade. Also makes Jasper pretty good. All in all, I like the concept of this deck a bit. I'll be curious to hear what Skinner, is going to change about it. For me, the first card that I look at in like an instance, because every deck I played in it, I just don't think it's very good, is Develop Your Brain. That's my first card that I think I would cut from this list if I was looking to really start adapting. That's number one for me. But let's check out Skinner, check out First to 20. See what he has to say about the deck, because I think it's really interesting. I think it's really great that he was successful with it. He went 4-1-1, got in the top 8, and I think he started the event 4-0 if I remember correctly. So hey, shout out to him, shout out to Skinner. Congrats on the great event, and for the most part, bringing another deck potentially into the meta game for people to truly look at and adapt to. All right, so a lot of information, right? I only really covered 2 decks, but I also covered like 3 total events. But we're coming down to the wire here, and we have to talk again about the inks. Now, there's been a lot of more of the same with the inks, but I think it's still developing. And I think this was the first week where we actually saw some sparks of life, in all honesty, from some of the lower inks on, the ranking in the last couple weeks, at least from, my point of view. All in all, I would love to know what your ink of the day is, right? Like, we had a whole weekend, we've had a whole month now of information come out. What do you think the top dog for Inkwise is? What do you think the not so top dog for Inkwise is? And if you don't agree with my comments, you don't agree with what I'm saying, hit me up in the comments, let me know why. Here we go. Ink rankings for week 4 meta reports. Yeah, hasn't changed. I know. It might be a bit of a letdown. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't change anything at all, because in all honesty, this is how I see it. While I enjoy the idea that Sapphire and Emerald are on the uptick, they're just clearly, if we go back to the graph, guys, like, there's just not enough of it. There's just not, like Ruby, again, like Ruby only has 11 decks. It's only been played and successful with Amethyst, but it still shows up 11 times, where like Sapphire, only shows up like 8 times. So you can't really move up in the meta at all if you're not representing it. And that's the problem with Sapphire and Emerald. Like, yeah, they've had sparks of life, they've had some nice success, but they haven't really proven it. And there hasn't been enough players to go out there and convince anybody that they're that much better. I still think they need a lot of support. The most interesting one is the deck I just covered, which is them two together in this like aggro version that I don't think people are really expecting. But, everyone can have a good event with a good deck, especially if you're, the creator of the deck, if you understand it, if your opponents don't understand how to play against it, catch a lot of people off guard, pick up a nice wins. It's kind of a true compliment to deck builders in general when they can catch the meta game off guard. But until the deck proves itself, or until other versions of Sapphire and Emerald really step up to the plate and prove themselves more, they're just going to remain in the gutter. And then stuff like Amber and Amethyst are clearly still 1 and 2 here, because they're everywhere. They are creating opportunity for whatever complement they're a part of. Amethyst, is now complementing across 5 events: Steel, Amber, Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire. It literally has complemented every other ink into a top 8 in one of these events. So yeah, it's the best ink, guys. Until proven otherwise, it's going to keep winning the best ink, because it just does everything for every other color so well. Even the Emerald decks, the Amethyst Emerald decks, they're only playing like 16 to 19 Amethyst cards, and it's just to draw cards. Like, it's just friends, it's just Maleficents, and then scatter in some random stuff. But that's really what they're doing. When you really start to look at the landscape of the last couple weeks, it just shouldn't be a shock to you at all that Amethyst and Amber have ruled the day and been completely awesome. And the biggest beneficiaries of both of those have been Steel and Ruby. Ruby only showing up with Amethyst, which is the only reason why it's on 4, because it's being completely carried by Amethyst to its, all of its events success. Whereas Steel has at least been complemented by Amethyst, by Amber, by Sapphire now as well. I don't think we've officially seen any Ruby or Emerald steel decks make a top cut, but I digress. It's been a lot of fun talking with you guys today and walking through this incredible amount of information this weekend. I would love to go more in depth, and I do plan on doing that. But let me know in the comments what event in specifically. We covered them all here already, so we'll go back to them real quick. But in all honesty, just let me know. Let me know, is it PBG, is it CCS, or is it Trading Card Game Con? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know. Hit me up on socials if you want, whatever. Pick on me all you want. Let me know which of these you want to hear about first, and that will be the next video that you see on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you enjoy it. I do these every single week. If you like this type of content, hit that subscribe button. If you want to watch last week's, here it is right here or right here. See where it shows. Thank you guys so much. See you guys in the next one.